All right, back live tonight here on In Focus, and thanks for staying on. Economic freedom fighters in Gauteng calling for the city of Johannesburg and human settlements in the province to immediately allocate the container houses in Alexandra to needy residents. The Red Berets also called for the removal of security companies and the suspension of police officers following the death of the party's councillor Moshe Mphahlele. EFF Gauteng chairperson Nkululeko Dunga joins us now for more on that. Good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. It's a 2010 legacy, if you want, that would have given us these containers. Why is it that 14 years on, you've got this particular establishment unallocated?
No, greetings to you and greetings to the viewers of Newzroom Afrika. Firstly, let us send our condolences to the Mphahlele family for the loss of a leader of the EFF and a member of the community of Alexandra, who was unfortunately murdered on the 4th of August during a protest. Look, Babamdluli, the most unfortunate part that the people of Alexandra are confronted with is the fact that there's roughly about 1,600 units that remain vacant since as late as 2019. You know, they are furbished, they are ready to be occupied, and members of the community were actually residing in these units up until they were removed and evicted by the city of Johannesburg. And these are units that have cost almost 300 million rands. That was paid by both the provincial government along with the Johannesburg Social Housing Company. You know, and it's really, really tragic as to why has there been no allocation for people to reside in these homes when just adjacent the gates of these units, we find people living in makeshift shelters made out of cardboard and plastic, which impacts direly on the dignity of our people, particularly those who are residing there, with the knowledge that they were actually at one point residing at these flats. The explanation that we have received is that they are awaiting the beneficiaries list. But I mean, the people who have been removed from these units should at this point become the primary beneficiaries of these units, considering the fact that they've shown that they do not have alternative accommodation and they're in dire need of a place to reside in.
So in February, of course, there was another eviction that was carried out, the city warning the people not to go back there. And part of what the city said, according to the then spokesperson who was speaking, said that the units remained dormant because they were not connected to essential services such as electricity and water. So in essence, there would not really be a place livable for people to go and live there without those essential services.
You know, there is a transformer, there is electricity in the area. There is an infrastructure of electricity inside these units. There is a water infrastructure as well as a sewage infrastructure. People were living there. But let's just reflect a bit. Members of communities across Gauteng have no access to electricity in most times, under the guise, obviously, of either load shedding or load reduction. Our electricity just came on not so long ago. The people of Stuetla and many other areas, whether it being Alexandra and some of the township areas in Alexandra, or whether you are going to Diepsloot or Tembisa and even in Ivory Park, are still not yet connected to the grid in terms of water infrastructure that gives them the right to be able to use the sewage facilities, meaning that now we can have flushing toilets, or even the ability to have running water through our taps. And these facilities have all of these things, that the standard and norms of society no longer have. So it's really not an explanation that we can or are willing to accept, and that these units, which have cost in excess of 300 million rands in 2019, remain just white elephants without the necessary infrastructure, when we have seen the infrastructure and people have lived there to show that there is such an infrastructure within these premises. And if there wasn't, then the Johannesburg social housing company ought to then have taken the responsibility to put to task those that they have mandated to actually construct these facilities. After spending so much money, to actually account as to why there hasn't been those particular infrastructures.
So if you are saying amenities are not the reason why there is no allocation, then why has there been an impasse in allocating them?
We remain to be responded to in terms of why there hasn't been an allocation. I mean, we know that the waiting list, particularly in Gauteng, is currently sitting at 2.5 million rands. And 2.5 million people who are on the waiting list, and there's a backlog of housing in regards to that. It's the EFF as well who has been continuously calling for the publicization of that particular list, so that we can really get to understand and know that when infrastructure is built, we know exactly who the beneficiaries of those particular settlements would be. So there's really no explanation. The other conclusion that one can make is that when such infrastructure remains unoccupied, it's going to leave room for members of society who are confronted with the challenge of housing to actually look at occupying those areas, more especially when there is no information that is given to them and there is no plan of action by the state, but it also breeds for a lot of corrupt elements and corrupt activities, such as now the selling of the ability to actually be a beneficiary. It includes now criminalities where now these buildings can potentially be hijacked by criminal syndicates who would then take rental monies from our people when they occupy these areas. And this is why we're calling that for the municipality to actually ensure that people occupy these units, and they occupy them immediately. We have written to the city manager to start effecting that particular position of the EFF.
But is your solution not going to create another challenge of wrongful occupiers, if you like, of those? Because if there is a short list or a list of whatever sort of beneficiaries, if you are saying those who have now occupied the illegally are the ones that must be prioritized, is that not going to put at a disadvantage those who are so-called rightful beneficiaries?
Well, the state does not have a list of the beneficiaries at this point. That's the one point. But the second most critical point is that we have members of society who do not have a place to reside in. If you were to go to the scene itself and you go to these units, just adjacent to the gates of these units, on the passages, on the sides of the street and the pavement, people have resorted to actually building homes out of plastic material as well as cardboard material, so that they can have a place for them to cover their heads. And that cannot be correct. We can't refer to such people as people who are illegal occupants in any way, because these are people who should be beneficiaries. They've shown that they do not have any other recourse. They do not have any other place to go to. And as a caring government, those are the first people that we should be looking at in terms of the allocation of houses.
This was, of course, not meant to be a permanent solution. In fact, the one time we had a conversation with the Minister of Human Settlement says that particular area in itself is also problematic because environmental assessment were not conducted to start with, and so it's not really a place that is meant to be a residential area, if you like, and therefore it would be prone to things like flooding and so on and so forth. So how are you approaching that particular debate?
So it's on a high-lying area. That's the first point. You can see almost the entire part of Alex when you are at these premises. So there is no way that it could potentially be prone for flooding in terms of water. However, right next to these container establishments that have been put up there are homes, and homes that have been there for quite a long time. There are business sites that have been operating for the longest of times, and they've never been subjected to what now the authorities would be speaking of in terms of floodings and so forth. So it's really just scapegoating. And if that was the case, then they ought to have then had, as I said earlier on, ensured that there's investigation, thorough investigation in terms of why then would we fruitlessly spend 300 million rands towards the building of an infrastructure that is, one, temporary, but number two, that is unusable, even though that it's a temporary measure. That would be the highest grand scale of looting, and people must be charged and people must be arrested for it. And a caring government, once more, would have ensured that they actually found the culprits and they had them arrested based on even their own submission to say that this particular place was not meant to be a permanent structure, and neither is it conducive for people to reside in.
So what is the next step that you are taking now? Of course, you've tabled a motion in council for the immediate allocation of those containers. What else?
Yeah, so from where we're standing as the economic freedom fighters is that the environment is conducive for habitation, and we are calling for those who were evicted, rather, to actually be given the right of way to actually move into these homes. It's a fight that we're prepared to take even before council in honor of our fallen hero, Moshe Mphahlele, who died at these premises fighting for the restoration of the dignity of people of Alex and those who are homeless to at least have a decent home over their heads. Over and above that as well is that we have called for all JMPD officials who were on site on Thursday to be suspended, preliminary suspended following an investigation, obviously, in terms of what could have transpired on the day, because we feel that they could have a dire impact in terms of the investigation outcome thereof. And equally as well, we have also called for the security companies that were tasked on the day to be at these particular premises to also be to have their contracts immediately suspended and withdrawn from the sites, because we can't have security companies that are presiding and still looking after a site that is a crime scene. There is a potential ability for them to contaminate and to clear out any evidence that can pinpoint back to them. We remain committed to fighting for the people of Alex, who were promised 1 million houses by the president of the DA-led coalition, Cyril Ramaphosa, and that is still something that we'll still advocate for in terms of the renewal project of Alexandra, because genuinely the people of Alex are living in an environment that is not conducive for habitation, particularly from a health perspective. There are continuous sewage spillages that we see, uncollected waste on the roads, and so forth. And that's what we'll continue to fight in honor of our fallen hero.
Nkululeko Dunga, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on, speaking on behalf of the EFF in the Gauteng province there, making their call clear for those who've been evicted from those containers in Alexandra to be reallocated those containers.